Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much for your time today. I'm always really excited and happy to see important bodies such as yours taking up topics related to animals. These are often complex and emotional because, according to the law, animals are property, but on the other hand, many people feel more like their pets are family members, and that can make these topics sort of hot button issues. My name is Mike Fry. I've worked in the field of animal sheltering for more than 20 years. My family founded Minnesota's first no-kill animal shelter back in 1977, and I ran that shelter for 15 years. I've also worked consulting with animal shelters across the United States, including some in New Jersey, where I have strong family ties. It's a sad fact that people do commit animal cruelty. It's a really sad fact also that sometimes people and entities are improperly charged with animal cruelty, sometimes even in overtly retaliatory ways. We basically have an imperfect system enforcing very imperfect laws, which is why adhering very strictly to the United States Constitution is so important in these cases. That Constitution prohibits the taking of property from people without due process of law, which is unfortunately exactly what will occur if these proposed changes are enacted. And property, I will repeat, that people feel is like family. That's not just my opinion. That question has been already asked and answered in our nation's court system multiple times. In the documents that I sent to the committee members in advance of this hearing, along with an early draft of my testimony today, I referenced one such case, but there are others too. The case I referenced was Louisville, Kentucky versus Louisville, Jefferson County Metro Government. In that case, the U.S. District Court examined a similar law, and in that decision, the district court wrote, quote, "Under the scheme set up in the statute, if a person was unable to put up the fee immediately upon the probable cause finding, his pet is forfeit and he has no apparent recourse for its recovery, even if he is ultimately found innocent of the underlying charge. There is thus a high risk of erroneous deprivation, which some sort of additional hearing, appeal, or late payment process could remedy," end quote. That court then concluded, quote, "Consequently, we must hold that portion of the statute that would permanently deprive a pet owner of his property absent a guilty finding is unconstitutional," end quote. Like the nullified law in that decision, the proposed changes in this bill will require people simply accused of violating laws to pay upfront the costs of animal care. This will force people who cannot afford these fees to forfeit their animals before due process has occurred. In some ways, the proposed changes you're considering today are much worse than the law that was thrown out in Louisville. That law imposed a set fine of $450. This proposed change sets an arbitrary, ambiguous fee. It refers only to, quote, "reasonable fees" without saying what that even means. And as a side note, that could potentially be a problem in the void for vagueness doctrine of the US Constitution. And again, that's not just my opinion. What is reasonable? Who gets to decide? Who gets to set the fees? The people collecting the money? In one case in Colorado, the reasonable fee set by an animal shelter under a similar law was more than $11,000. And when that pet owner could not pay the fee, her pets were killed. Not only was there never any finding of guilt in that case, it was later determined that the pets were taken illegally, though the plaintiff, or should I say victim in that case, ended up prevailing, but there was still no way to get her dogs back. Needless to say, the overwhelming majority of victims in these such situations lack the wherewithal and resources to assemble a legal team in order to fight the system. They simply get run over by an enormous process that was given little or no regard for their basic constitutional rights. If these changes become law in your state, these pets taken from families will be put into animal sheltering system that I and many New Jersey residents believe to be badly broken. State inspection reports for New Jersey animal shelters show that it's not uncommon for these shelters themselves to be violating your state's animal cruelty laws, ironically. Additionally, many of these shelters pushing for these changes have shockingly high kill rates in them. And while they often try to blame the boogeyman of pet overpopulation for the killing that they themselves are doing, they actually have lower intake rates than open admission animal shelters in other states that stopped killing animals years ago. These proposed changes will, without a doubt, result in some pets being taken away from families and then killed before the court system ultimately finds those families not guilty. That, of course, will be an overt violation of the US Constitution, which prohibits the taking of property without due process. Again, that's a question that has been asked and answered by our courts already. Having taken an oath to protect and defend the US Constitution on behalf of your constituents, I believe that it's your job today to make sure that that never happens. Furthermore, if you look at the finances of the organizations pushing for these changes, it's clear that they don't need the money to be paid to them before these cases are adjudicated in a court of law. It's not like they're living month to month, paycheck to paycheck. If they are, maybe they shouldn't even be giving responsibility to care for people's pets while these cases are adjudicated. In spite of the general public perception that animal shelters are always in need of money, they frequently have hefty bank accounts and pay their executives enormous salaries, sometimes into the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. Furthermore, one of the dirty little secrets of the sheltering industry is that cruelty cases are already the cash cows of these agencies. They provide the best marketing, the best public relations and fundraising of any other situations they handle, because almost nothing can get donors to open their pocketbooks, like the sensational news story that surround animal cruelty cases. Therefore, these proposed changes will undoubtedly create problems for your constituents trying to solve an issue that doesn't even really exist. There's a stunning irony here that I also can't help to point out. The very organizations pushing for these changes to give them more power and more money have come before this very assembly previously to vehemently oppose common sense regulations that would increase their own accountability and transparency. The regulations that they have opposed have been implemented elsewhere and have ended killing in animal shelters without negative consequences. But the organizations asking for you to give them more power and money now have vehemently opposed any kind of real oversight or accountability. And as a side note, as an additional comment about how, they say that these animals are going to languish in shelters, well, they don't have to. They could, go into foster care. There's a whole host of things they could do to enrich the lives of those animals while those cases are adjudicated. And the notion that these cases will not affect, individual small dog cases is, sort of destroyed by the fact that Ms. Pfeiffer then spoke about a case she was currently working with that was a single dog. Of course, they'll be used in cases of all kinds of numbers of animals. I urge you to vote no for the Constitution, for the sake of the animals, and for the families who love them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.